All right, patron parishioners, thank you for tuning in for this week's bonus content. So in our episode earlier today, we covered the very famous scene of the Red Sea being parted by Moses. Super iconic, as Emily said, really famous. And so what we did is we went back and, of course, we watched that scene in The Prince of Egypt because it's beautiful and astounding. And then we also watched this really interesting YouTube video that you can watch and see for yourself if you look for, the title of the video is The Visual Effects of Parting the Red Sea Through the Years. And what they do is they do a comparison, like a side-by-side comparison of how this scene has been accomplished in all of the different film versions of the story of Moses. And bear in mind that a lot of the film versions of the story of Moses take place pre-CG. So where we're not able to just really quickly kind of digitally create this really amazing scene of the sea parting. And I picked it out specifically because...
No, we're talking Jell-O.
Literally, Jell-O was used in the creation of that.
Yes, in the 1923 version.
Yes.
So I totally forgot that Cecil B. DeMille, he directed the Ten Commandments, like the 1957 version that we've been watching, but that's a remake of his 1923 version. Like, get that. 1923, it was in black and white, so it's like no visual effects to speak of, really. And yes, Jell-O was used in that particular scene. Now, Jace, I picked out this video because I thought that you would enjoy it because you are a VFX boy.
I am a VFX boy, that's true. Very accurate. Yeah, I mean, I remember as a kid, I think, watching some sort of TV special about the making of the Charlton Heston, the second Cecil B. DeMille version, and kind of how they composited that together from different shots and how they played the footage backwards and stuff like that. I do think it really inspired some of my early videos I made with my brother where things would disappear by stopping the camera and then removing them and
those,
then
like,
starting
really
the camera again.
early camera tricks that you would do.
Look at you. Adorable.
We definitely, had some videos of magic shows that we did using those techniques. It's pretty great.
Nice.
Wow.
Basically, same caliber as what we just watched.
Right.
Yeah.
So the most famous one that was still made using like practical effects is probably the one in the Ten Commandments, which was, as they explained in the video, on the Paramount studio lot, they had these two gigantic troughs of water that they recorded having the water spill over the top, and then they reversed that footage and composited it into the film. My grandfather told me years ago when I was a child, and I have not corroborated this claim, so take it with a grain of salt, but my grandfather told me years ago that for a long time they kept those troughs of water at the Paramount lot and would recreate that for tourists.
Wow.
That would
that
show
was part
up.
of the tour?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh my
I would
gosh.
love to see that on the tour.
Well, because think about it. In 1956, like,
Yeah.
you see that film and you're like, how the hell did they do that? And of course, if you went on a Paramount Studio tour, of course, that would be their crowning achievement of like, this is how we did it.
For
I
sure.
think it makes sense.
That's incredible. I mean, there is something amazing about practical effects, especially now, like in the day of CG, where we're just very jaded as a community. I think we're like, yeah, whatever.
That's true.
But I mean, I recently saw the movie Hellraiser, or at least parts of it, and is it Hellraiser?
Yeah,
Maybe. I mean, that is a movie.
it is. Yes, that is a film.
Yeah, that one with
Yes,
Yeah,
that's Hellraiser.
Yeah, and it's not a great film, but also it is great in the practical visual effects that it has. They're rather gruesome and horrifying, but also really impressive, and it does kind of like add to that visceral sense of, wow, you're really watching something happening, as opposed to just like a fake CG thing that you have to suspend your disbelief for a bit.
Yeah, it is kind of funny to think that for us now in modern day, like, I'm trying to think of, like, when's the last time that we as a movie-going audience saw a visual effect where we were like, I've never seen anything like that before. And the only thing that comes to mind for me is, like, the bullet time thing in The Matrix.
Yeah,
where
maybe.
they like built this custom camera rig and kind of invented this look that's now everywhere.
Maybe, you know what? Okay, actually, I would do you one more. Maybe
what?
Avatar, not in the world, but in the facial motion capture. Because, I mean, I was a mocap person back in the day. And so I feel like Avatar was really groundbreaking, at least on like a major audience scale of showing people the capabilities of facial motion capture.
Huh.
Yeah, that's what I would
Okay,
argue.
maybe. Yeah.
That's maybe a little bit more subtle.
But I feel like it's rare. I feel like we're a little bit numb
We're
to
just like,
sort of
yeah, whatever.
Cool, whatever. You made a building explode, or like
Right.
you know, like in Inception. I thought there were some really amazing visual effects in that movie, but no one was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like
Right.
it. Even if they hadn't, it wasn't enough.
Yeah, no one is like, oh my
different.
god, how do they do that?
Right,
Or things like
right.
that. Yeah.
Except for me, I was like that.
Well, okay.
Of
I think it's so
course, of
funny
course you were.
that okay, so you think about the Lord of the Rings series that came out not too long ago. Obviously very CG heavy, and
Right.
in a lot of interviews, like the director and like the VFX supervisor and stuff like that, we're talking about the fact that no one made a full Lord of the Rings trilogy series of movies for a long time because for so long it was like the only option we have is to hand animate this. Like we don't have the technology or the ability to make a movie of this scale, you know, just using the tools that we have. And so they had to wait until the technology was actually at a point where they could make the film that it was. However, I look at something like this and I'm like, in 1923, they like looked at the story of the Moses and they're like, plagues, Red Sea parting, whatever. We can do that.
Hundreds of thousands of people.
Exactly,
like-
hundreds of thousands of people. Whatever,
we can
we
do
can
that.
figure it out.
Whatever, we
and
got
they
it.
did, and
No
that's
prob.
super amazing. Especially with the extras thing, like the fact that like they didn't have digital compositing of crowds.
Yeah.
They just had.
Yeah.
We're gonna round up 1,000 extras and
Yep.
film them a bunch of times as much as we can, and we got to feed those people and clothe those people and keep them happy, and it really is amazing.
Yeah. And for a movie like that where they all have to
Yeah.
be clothed in
Yes.
specific like period clothing and whatever. Yeah, it is really interesting.
Anyway, I thought
they
it was
covered
pretty
some
cool.
other
Yeah.
movies too, but like kind of nothing was very remarkable except
Yeah,
for
so there's the 1923 version of the Ten Commandments, which was directed by Cecil B. DeMille, and then 30 years later he pulled a George Lucas and was like, I'm going to remake this with better technology. And unlike George Lucas, it ended up being the better version, which was the 1957 version with Charlton Heston that we've been watching. And then they
Yeah.
covered Prince of Egypt. They covered, it seems like some more like mini-series style situations, like one with, was it Burt Russell? And one with, it couldn't have been Burt Russell. I must be remembering that incorrectly.
Kurt
Not
Russell?
Kurt Russell.
Wait, who's
Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds.
Burt Russell? Kurt Russell's long lost dad.
It was Burt Lancaster. That's who it was.
Okay.
Sorry, a different Burt. A
There
different
you
Burt.
go.
I love it.
Or the version of the story with Ben Kingsley, but all of them were kind of like, meh.
Meh. Yeah.
Ironically, maybe more realistic, as we were saying, of like kind of just the waters receding a little bit as opposed to this big explosion and very triumphant parting of the waters.
Yeah, because
And then, of course,
Yeah.
there's Exodus, which came out just a few years ago, and which I believe no one really cared about too much. But was all it was
yeah,
all,
I didn't even know that was going to
but
be
it was
there.
all CG.
That was there.
But
at
I feel
all.
like once we're done reading Exodus, the three of us should probably watch that movie
Do you think
together.
so?
I think it would be interesting.
Which one? The new Exodus or the Ten Commandments?
Well, both. Let's watch them both. I
think
was
it-
saying we should watch
honestly-
Exodus, Gods and Kings, the Ridley Scott one, because I haven't seen it and I'm curious.
I think it would be refreshing to see a Moses movie where there's some like actual Hebrews in it instead of just white people.
That's true, as opposed to just a bunch of white
Yeah.
people.
That's a
yeah.
good point. That is a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, even I'm like Ridley Scott, really
Absolutely.
Christian Bale, like. Come
Yeah,
on.
that is a weird.
It's like it's that
choice.
movie was in like 2000
jeez.
what 14 13
2014, I think,
yeah,
yeah.
so I'm like
Yeah.
come on now.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will say yes, the portrayal of this scene in The Prince of Egypt was quite beautiful, if quite horrifying.
It is spooky.
It's just, I don't know, like The Prince of Egypt, I know I saw it as a child, and it didn't stick with me very much, obviously, but I feel like if I really had paid attention, it would have been pretty scary. That's a lot of scary stuff happening. People dying in the water. Jace's worst
Seriously,
nightmare.
no, it's horrifying. It is awful.
Ray Fiennes, who plays Pharaoh, he exists.
I did not realize Ray Fiennes was Pharaoh in that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when they're walking through the parted sea, which is parted like it goes up miles above
Miles,
them.
and it's maybe like
nuts.
6 feet wide.
Yeah.
They have to go through.
Super narrow, but you can see like whales swimming by in it with like lightning
Yeah, it was really
flashing
cool. They
behind
did
them. It was
that.
cool, but like I'm like that whale swims out the edge there and just falls on them all. Like That's the end of.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I just had to look up the cast of The Prince of Egypt. So, first of all, star-studded cast: Sandra Bullock, Ray Fiennes, Michelle Pfeiffer, Steve Martin, Danny Glover, Jeff Goldblum, Patrick Stewart, Helen Mirren. You want to take a guess at who played Moses?
You barely heard him talk. He just kind of like cried.
It's, Zac Efron.
Val Kilmer. Who
Wait.
you learned
Really?
played Moses in the musical version, which you also just learned about.
Oh my
10 minutes
gosh.
ago.
Yeah, so I just discovered recently that there was 10 Commandments the musical. So this was a stage show in 2004 with Val Kilmer playing Moses.
That's so funny. After Prince of Egypt, they came out. They were like, "That's our Moses." Like,
yeah,
that's the one.
I guess so. Wait, so when did Prince of Egypt come out?
1998.
I see. So then when they did the musical, they're like, we need that guy.
He's the shoe-in.
He's just got that musical voice.
He's got that Moses vibe.
Yeah,
Again,
for sure.
all white people, I will point out.
Yes, this is true. But yeah, I looked this
Except
up.
for Danny Glover, not a white person.
That's true.
Okay.
But I looked this up, and so it's called The 10 Commandments, the musical. Definitely go look it up. There's some footage on YouTube. But this came out in 2004 as a stage show, which I guess was actually a translation of something that was originally a French show, I think.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
I think it was French originally. I'm sorry if I'm wrong about that. But they did it, and it had Val Kilmer, and it had Adam Lambert in it as Joshua,
So
who we've
funny.
not come
Oh my
across
gosh.
yet. But what's funny is
No.
this was before The Voice really took off. And so
Oh.
they have since re-released covers of the DVD that feature his name on it.
Oh,
Because
how
before he
funny.
wasn't like a featured name on it, because he was
A
just
big deal.
some dude in a
Yeah.
band. And so, yeah, it is funny that happened. But it's generally the musical itself, not reviewed terribly well, but the actors' performances in it are fairly well regarded. Of like
Okay.
they all did a great job in a meh musical.
Okay.
But anyway, they did make a movie of this. They made a DVD in 2006 with the original cast, including Val Kilmer and Adam Lambert. So if you want to watch
Wow.
this, you'll have to go get the DVD. There's a few clips on YouTube, but yeah. Anyway, wow, I had no idea that Val
Right?
Kilmer was Moses in Prince of Egypt. That's nuts.
Yeah.
That's so interesting, Jace. It all comes full
Right,
circle.
right.
It really
Well,
does.
We so appreciate you listening to us talk about all of these different ways in which this scene was created. It's really interesting, and we're excited to watch more and to learn more about what happens next to Moses.